I got into this and why I'm here, and then we'll jump right in. So my mom was an editor and really, really loved the written word. Um, and I've always been a bit of a content weenie. I remember years and years ago, I had a roommate who accused me of editing her speech, and I realized just later how obnoxious that was. And I am embarrassed to say that I ever did that to anybody, but I did. Um, and when I realized you could make a living being a word nerd, that was such a wonderful thing. As Paula mentioned, my passion is in not only doing some of my own writing, but in dismantling white supremacy through having transformational conversations. And there's some overlap with what we'll be doing tonight and supporting white anti-racist leaders and creating white anti-racist culture. So that's a bit about me. When my very first contract at eBay, I realized that we were working in this tiny little domain and there were no content strategy resources out there. I found that the one book by Anne, I can't remember, Anne Rockman, something like that.
Rockley, Anne Rockley.
Anne Rockley, right.
Managing enterprise content.
Managing enterprise content. It was a behemoth of a book, very dense. And but I couldn't help but think of, in my mind, I kept trying to squeeze the corporation into something manageable, like a magazine, because I'd worked in print before, and you can't do that. But all this time I've been kind of trying to, because I think that it's worth it. So I'm already starting to go into some of the content of the presentation. So let me just do that. So we already know what this is. Next. So the plan for tonight is I'm going to give some context, some historical and factual context, some philosophical context, like how I invite us all to approach this. And then I'm going to offer a model of UX content maturity and how content standards fit in, and some ideas for how to elevate and evolve content standards no matter where you are and what you're doing. I can't guarantee that there's something in here that's going to work for you. I've been in places where it felt just impossible, but I think there are more opportunities than many people think. So my goal, my fondest wish for tonight is for all of you to leave here with at least one new thing that you can do to elevate and evolve content standards wherever you are. Once or twice, we'll break into small groups and you'll get to reflect on some of these things and formulate thoughts. In the second breakout, you'll get to practice having a conversation with someone that we'll demonstrate first. And then at the end, that's not a live link, but you'll get invited to share your solutions and insights in a common document. Before tonight, I sent out a survey, and so far we've only had 41 responses, which is not terribly statistically significant, but there were some very good ideas in there about elevating content standards. So I put those all in a document, and I'm going to share that with you at the end. Paula, I'm assuming that there's a way to share this deck because the links will be live at the end. You can click over and add your ideas and see what other people are saying too, and even keep in touch with each other. So
yeah, absolutely. We'll share the deck on all of those channels that I mentioned earlier.
Oh, great. Okay. Next. So some basic definitions. Wait, let me make sure that my presenter notes are catching up to David. So I assume that most people here already know these things, but I don't want to assume that necessarily everybody does. UX stands for user experience. User experience content or writing is what you see when you open up an app or a website and try to do stuff like sign up or buy things. It helps people transact, relay information, and basically everything you do with any kind of digital product. UX writing is not the same as marketing writing or content. It's not the same as visual or interaction design or creative writing, but there's a lot of overlap. I took away the slide that showed all the overlap, but UX writing interacts with has to do with a lot of these things. Next. So UX content standards include, but may not be limited to, guidelines for terminology, voice and tone, the length and style and usage of content, and how that content varies from flow to flow, body copy, help content design components, and so on. Next. So actually, can you go back for a moment? We often see, never mind, I'll say that one later. Next. So the assumptions that I'm starting with, I want to sort of come out of the closet with these now so that there's no surprises later and you know what you're signing up for. The first assumption is that it is worthwhile to pursue a holistic or end-to-end approach to content standards. And by holistic, I mean that the user experience with a digital product or service begins the moment they encounter anything about that company, whether it's an ad, a Facebook group, a text, anything, to their final interaction with the company. And content standards figure into every single one of those interactions. And if you care about user experience, as someone who cares about user experience, I care about all of the experience, not just this one little corner that I work in. I've always felt that way. And I think it's incredibly worthwhile to think about the entire user experience holistically, even if it seems impractical, even if it seems impossible, I still think it's worthwhile. So that's a starting assumption here. Another one is that UX content standards are at least as important as print standards, and even more so when you consider all that's at stake with UX. And therefore, I want to see at least as much dedication and as many resources put toward consistentification of UX standards as I do in print publications. Another assumption I'm starting with is there is usually something that you can do to elevate and evolve content standards within your organization. You probably don't have to do it all by yourself, and things can get better over time. Next. So a little bit of history. This was really fun. Print publications have been around for more than 2,000 years. That's a big head start. Whereas the first public website appeared just 33 years ago in 1991. So, print publications, of course, have always been intrinsically content driven. However, digital products are driven by technology deployed toward business ends. Luckily, we have a very good case for content standards, a very good business case, as well as the hallowed print history of content standards and a burgeoning discipline of UX writing to draw from. Technical writers at Microsoft in the late 90s started to be called UI text writers and later UX writers. And that is all the history I could find of how the term UX writers came into being. Maybe somebody else knows something else. Next. So we have a gap here in those standards. We don't have the same kinds of rigorous content standards as print publications do, even though we now use apps for all these things that we used to do the old-fashioned way. Medical things, health, well-being, maintaining our homes and our cars, keeping in touch with people who are important to us, managing our finances. These things are vital. Next. So just for a moment, imagine, if you will, a publication like the New York Times with no editors to enforce their content standards. Let us know in the chat if you also faint thinking about this. Well, think about it too. When a newspaper makes a content error, they run an errata. Maybe somebody gets offended or rolls their eyes. When a digital product makes a content error, somebody could miss a plane, lose medical information, and get incorrect financial data about their own money. Next. So the irony of all this, to me, is that a holistic end-to-end UX content set of UX content standards that is upheld to which resources are allocated creates the best customer experience, which in turn supports business goals. Seems very obvious to me. Next. So when we look at them side by side, meaning when we look at the standards of digital products alongside the standards of print publications, we have an existing standard to hold us to in terms of the importance of content standards and the amount of resources to dedicate. We have a rationale that we can use to evangelize the need for resources to create, implement, and govern content standards as an organic element of how any company does business. So we're going to take a look now at a few artifacts of missing, misguided, or not fully adopted content standards. Next. Here's one of them. I love the parentheses. If you look between the zeros, it says X be dead. Next.
Oh, minor comment on that. That's a bit, I'm a former Microsoft developer, and that is a very famous hex code, because that's a hex number 0BE0DEAD is a code that is hard-coded into Microsoft Windows. Anyway, interesting bit of technical lore there. Next, I'll be quiet now.
Well, by the way, David is my partner in life and creativity and all kinds of things. He's also the tech guy here. He'll also be putting you into breakout rooms. He's also the bouncer in case anyone's giving you any trouble. So if you have any issues with anything, you can reach out to him. Next. So I just came across this very recently on a website that I love. And if nothing else, it was nice to see that Microsoft does not have a monopoly on creating bad error messages. Next. So this is based on an actual message that I encountered recently with details changed to protect anyone. I want to find out what you think this means. I want to ask you to put into the chat the letter or letters that you think are correct. To avoid monthly fees, maintain a minimum balance of $1,200 or more. Do you think it means A, the minimum balance might go up without notice? B, the minimum balance could be a figure larger than 1,200, but they won't tell you exactly what it is. C, the minimum balance is 1,200, but the bank hopes you'll keep more in your account. D, the text got cut off and there's more somewhere. E, nobody edited this. F, the UX writer edited out the redundancy, but the PM insisted on reinstating the redundancy. So take a moment, put into the chat, which of these things do you think is true? C, D, E, and F. C and F. C and F. Yeah, a lot of C and Fs. I mean, that's it. The minimum balance is 1,200, and the reason that the PM insisted, I think, was because they wanted to uphold the business goals of having people have more money in the bank. And so there's this redundancy here. Thanks for playing along. Where am I? So let's talk a little bit more about what might happen if we don't have ideal content standards next. Some risks could include bad user experiences, sometimes with severe consequences, customers abandoning a flow, user confusion, lowered net promoter scores, and increased call center costs. So go ahead and put in the chat, can you think of other risks? You don't have to have experienced them yourself. I'm going to take a drink while you do that. Financial mistakes that can be costly, lack of accessibility, bad reviews, negative brand perception. Yeah, so there are some risks. In a moment, we're going to talk about what can happen when content professionals try to bring forth, enforce, and implement content standards, even things as simple as just the English language, internal confusion. Yep, people can't figure out what's going on. Next, do you ever feel like this? That sometimes when you are setting out to do something like, for example, write a clear sentence, that you come up against things like ill-conceived business requirements, marketing hyperbole, legal demands, and so on. This is a little different from what happens when you try to enforce content standards in print publications. Anything else people come up against that? So it says I want to put this on a t-shirt. People have come up against that aren't here. If you want to, go ahead and put that in the chat too. So remember that survey I mentioned? Next. 41 people responded to this question. Please indicate your level of agreement or disagreement with this statement. I'm almost going to cry, okay, as I read this. My content expertise at this organization, meaning the one they work for, is valued, respected, and well utilized. Okay, so almost 40% they agree or strongly disagree, but more than a third said disagree or strongly disagree. This makes me so sad. 27% are neutral. Okay, this is a lot better than it used to be. This is a lot better than it used to be. Next. Does anyone see a connection here? Between so many content professionals feeling that their expertise is not valued, respected, and well utilized, and all of this sort of conflagration of bad error messages and other content? Is it just me seeing a connection? Short timelines. So what we give attention to and resources to thrives, and the opposite of also true. The opposite is also true. And I'm going to say it again, but even though you've heard me loud and clear, I'm sure that I advocate the same rigor and diligence for UX content as we give to print, because the stakes are even higher. It creates the best customer experience, and it's a grossly overlooked way of supporting business goals. So now let's take a look at a very high level at first, a model of UX content maturity. Next. So you might, when I first started researching content maturity, mainly what I saw was marketing content maturity. It's more money goes into marketing. Fixing content is generally a lot cheaper than fixing. So I'm told not to pay attention to the chat right now. My ADD has me all over. So I saw mainly models of marketing content maturity, and I also saw models of UX maturity. So I started putting some thought to what would a truly UX content mature organization look like. So at a high level, what we have at the beginning is individuals working, not very connected, a lot of one-offs, ad hoc, and any evangelizing tends to come from the bottom. And then as we move up toward, now I have to admit, the highest level, as far as I know, is purely mythical. At the highest level, we have something resembling how content standards work in print publications, which are they are collective, consistent, they're systemic, they're throughout the whole organization, and they're evangelized from the top, and the bottom dynamically. I think we have to keep, the Emerald City in mind as we go. We have to name it so that we have something to work toward. Next. So I'm going to get a little bit more granular here, and even more granular when I break it down. But these are, this is not a hard and fast, written in stone sort of model, but these are earmarks of maturing UX content standards. So at the beginning, we have things like a style guide, alignment with any other style guides, like maybe you're in UX and marketing has its own and corporate communications has yet another, reviewing with peers, connecting with other departments. So basically beginning to find your peeps, receptive colleagues engaging in productive tension, which we'll talk about later, and establishing credibility, trust, and respect across the organization. And then as you move up, you start to leverage those relationships into practices that uphold and promulgate those standards. Like, for example, a cross-organizational content council. Having content standards live alongside and be taken as seriously as design standards, and beginning to expand the governance with things like audits, updates, workflows, and processes, and exploring technology and working with research, and then going all the way up where content is platformed at up through the executive level, and there are cross-organizational standards that bend and flex across all departments while remaining appropriately unified. Content strategy is throughout the content lifecycle. Content folks are all recognized, respected, and their expertise is fully utilized. And there's up to the minute technology governing all types of content. Maybe, does anybody have that already? I mean, I would love to know about it. Please say so if you do. So, yeah, between 3 and 4. So ideal, let's keep our ideals in mind. So what I'm about to do next is go through these 1 through 6 in more detail. And again, this is something of not exactly arbitrary, but you might do it differently. For right now, we'll do it this way. And I welcome anyone to improve upon this. But what I'm going to do right now is go through 1 through 6 in more detail, invite you to think about where you are and what your next step would be, could be. Next. So with 1, you're probably either developing a style guide or you have one that includes your UX department's unique interpretation and expression of marketing and brand guidelines. Or maybe you haven't thought about the marketing and brand guide that's just working on your own. So I think that's a worthwhile connection to make. UX content supports the brand, but it is not marketing content. What does that actually mean? Something kind of juicy to explore. Talk to the departments who own the flows user adjacent to yours. So in other words, if people land on Facebook ads or print ads, if people get to your UX flows, they get to it through somewhere. Who owns those? Let's start having conversations with them about terminology and their content standards, and find other content creators in your department who are interested in alignment and holistic standards, and start creating peer processes to help align your work. Next. And to regularly engage with and update that style guide as new products and use cases emerge to keep it alive and relevant. And then finding as many content creators as you can to involve in discussions and decisions around standards. See what research is up to. Who can you talk to who might have some juicy tidbits of data that you can apply to what you're doing and will help drive data-driven decisions, and so on. Next, went from emerging to emerging, growing and evolving. Growing and evolving those cross-organizational relationships even more. Finding ways to bring content standards into design standard space, see where the overlap is and how content standards can live and be utilized alongside design standards. See how you can strengthen your relationship with research, and begin to audit for standards discrepancies both within UX and other departments, and initiate processes to resolve them. Often there's often content standards issues are so closely linked with UX interactions. I remember I did an audit for OpenTable customer facing content a few years ago, and I wound up just including, it was like a UX interaction audit because the content was so tied up with that. Next. Evolving and propagating, so expanding governance of standards to include those full audits and updates, cross-organizational collaboration, more fully utilizing available technology, and seeking out thought leadership for guidance on how to optimize content standards. Next, budgeting for and staying ahead of or propagating, establishing, at least meeting content needs, and finding and resolving hidden obstacles along the content production chain, such as errors introduced during builds or not caught during QA, or customer service and UX discrepancies and terminology. So to sort of become a detective, where is it breaking down? And next. So developing content leaders at the highest level who understand and promote holistic organization standards throughout the organization, promoting a content-forward approach to design throughout, and providing thought leadership to others on how to optimize content standards. Again, this is our gold standard. Looking for my notes, give me a second. I have to catch up. So I was originally going to break out, but I think we're farther along time-wise. I mean, I was going to have you break out because I wasn't going to break out in front of you. So I think what I'd like to do is ask you to take a moment and think about where you are next, where you are in this model, roughly, it doesn't have to be exact, and what is your next step? And it doesn't have to be a step that is realistic, just in ideal circumstances. Let's say you would be in closer contact with marketing, or you would have a cross-organization content council, whatever it is. Take a moment, think about what would be the next thing that you would do if you could to grow your UX content maturity within your organization, and go ahead and put that in the chat. Again, it doesn't have to be realistic or something you believe you can do, but just if you were to have it your way. And I can go over those again if that would help.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea.
Okay, let's go back to number one, and you can put it in the chat as we go. Can you go back to number one, David? So number one is, if you don't have one, develop a style guide. And if you do have one, take a look at voice and tone and UX's unique expression of marketing and brand guidelines. If your brand is rah enthusiastic, but you want your UX to be, not full of hyperbole, that's an art, that's a skill. Who are the folks who are working on the content that are user adjacent to yours? How can you begin to explore alignment? Are there peers that you have that you could be more cooperative with in terms of creating peer review processes and that sort of thing? And let's go to number two. Can you take every new product release as an opportunity to see, are there new terms being introduced? Are there new content use cases where you have to work around a development thing, or find a new way to talk about something and make a record of that, or find out what other people are doing, what you can learn from? Are there questions you have about how effective your content is that research could help with, or do they have data already that can help you answer questions that are involved? Oh, next step is incredibly basic, performing a content audit. Okay. Next, can you start to talk across the organization? Are there people who are doing the emails about the product that you're writing on? Corporate communications, PR, marketing, customer service. more work with research. Auditing, yeah. Should I keep going? Let's go next. What kind of technology could you use? Are there ways that you can streamline the creation of content that gets put into design tools like Sketch or Figma and delivered to development? Are there ways that you can look at the process of content delivery and weed out any any places where errors are coming in, audits, updates, workflows, processes? What are thought leaders saying about what to do at your stage next? Can you get more content people involved to do some of these things? Where are the hidden obstacles and opportunities along the content production chain for making things more efficient, for eliminating errors, for upgrading the processes? Next. And how can you advocate for content leadership at the highest level and promote a content forward approach to design throughout the organization? And this is gold standard here. Next. So we're not breaking into small groups because you just put it in the chat and I wanted to save some time. I don't know if I did, but so next. Next. This is a sort of crude model of somebody just said silo, and we're just talking about silos here. The reverse of what I wrote, the end-to-end user experience, the disjunctures that users experience between, say, an email and a UX flow, those disjunctures are mirrored within the organization. The organizational silos mirror the end-to-end user experience, or they can. And so in order to elevate and consistentify the user experience, we need to bridge those silos, which means we need to connect with and collaborate with each other. And I know that most of you who are working as UX writers or even as managers or directors are really busy. And it doesn't always feel like there's time to do this kind of thing. But it can be really useful and good for business and good for eliminating what's bad for business. For example, like if an email says, congratulations on your widget, and the instructions say how to use your gadget, and customer service calls it a hoodget, it's because those departments didn't talk to each other. Might seem obvious, but it is an extremely common gap. For example, when I was at Symantec, when I first got there, I noticed that a product would get released and people didn't talk to each other about what to call it, and there were discrepancies. And so when I was there long enough to notice this, we were trying to upgrade the perceived value of SSL, secure sockets layer certificates. And so we added on a service that would scan the site for vulnerabilities and provide a report. Well, one department was calling it a vulnerability scan, another was calling it a vulnerability report, and somebody else was calling it a vulnerability assessment. And so I basically just called a meeting and had everybody come in and said, we need to unify on this, or we're going to have a terrible user experience and customer service calls are going to increase possibly, and who knows what else. So once we were all in the room, it only took about 45 minutes. And what we decided was that what we were offering was a vulnerability assessment that included a scan and a report. And everyone was like, yeah, of course, that's what we're doing. But no one had stopped to think about how we might unify around the terminology. So that's one example, bringing people together and talking. Sometimes it's not that hard. Sometimes it's harder. And so next, I want to bring some words and phrases into the room that are relevant here. Some of them I've already uttered. One of them is chutzpah. Chutzpah is Yiddish for audacity. right? I took a step in bringing people into the room. I wasn't entitled to, I was just, what was I? I was a senior content strategist. You don't have to have any particular title in order to do a lot of this stuff. And, you know, I was going to say leadership is inspiring others to your vision. It's a definition I've had for a long time. But just this afternoon, it occurred to me that leadership can also be waking up or catalyzing someone's dormant vision. For example, a PM or a developer, you know, or a business manager might have buried deep within somewhere, or maybe not so deep, this vision of a more consistentified, of a much better user experience than has happened so far. And if you can align with them on that, if you could lead them into alignment with your vision on that by appealing to their vision, that's also leadership. Respect, trust, credibility, curiosity. These are things that can go a very long way in bridging those silos right alongside all these other things. And also, I love this one, productive tension. Productive tension. Everywhere I've worked, there has been tension between marketing and UX. This can be a productive tension, but the way meetings and conversations around content often go is that the loudest voice wins. Some folks who typically give in to the loudest voice give in. And then people go away kind of grumbling, resentful, and somebody won. However, I think that, let's just stay with the example of marketing and UX, because it's a great example of how marketing interests and UX interests, that tension can be very productive. Maybe marketing wants a UX flow to have a little more pizzazz, and maybe UX wants marketing to reference, you know, more concrete terms or something. If we can come to the common interests of creating a great user experience that supports the brand, and we can probably find ways to enrich each other's practices. And then the last thing is informative, transformational conversations. Because if you're going to make a connection with somebody across a silo, someone you've never talked to before, it's going to start with a conversation, right? Next. So, a transformational conversation might bridge a silo that blocks content consistentification. It might result in initiating a process to up-level content standards adoption. It might reveal information that provides an immediate content solution. For example, once I was done with that content audit at OpenTable for the customer-facing side, I went over to cover, I think someone was on maternity leave or something, on the restaurant, the B2B side. And I was working on one of these deceptively simple projects where I was to write a sentence, a single sentence that let the restaurant owners know that the portal would be down for the summer. And both the PM and the developer felt pretty certain that they knew what that sentence should say. I was skeptical. I really wanted to know how the customer service representatives talked to the restaurant managers about this phenomenon. I wanted to know the words that came out of their mouth into the restaurant manager's ears so that we could echo them and remain consistent. That is content standards. So I started nosing around, which isn't always successful in a large organization, but I found the content operations manager, and I introduced myself and I said, I'm really interested in finding out how your customer service folks talk to the managers about this. She practically wept with joy. She said, no one ever asks us anything. We know so much. We have amassed so much knowledge about those kinds of questions, and we are longing to share it, but no one's ever asked us. And I was so happy I felt like I had tapped into this gold mine. And so she looked at the screens and she helped us write this sentence, which of course was nothing like even our best guesses because we didn't know anything and she knew it all. So we talked for a half an hour and I promised her that I would introduce her when the person I was replacing came back. And that just took a little bit of chutzpah, a little bit of nosing around and having a conversation. And so that was one silo bridged. And that relationship over time is the kind of relationship that can become so productive and can elevate content standards. So I want to ask you to put in the chat, what else might a conversation do? What could it do where you are? Or what has it done? What would you like it to do? Anything? Create community. And I want to give, if you are a content leader, I want to give a shout out. This is sort of a, what's the word? Seems like a little bit of a non sequitur. When I was in college, I took a psychology of management class and a simple one-on-one with an engineer, just getting to know them. Yes, right? Elevate an unknown resource. I was in a psychology of management class many years ago. And the teacher said, if you remember nothing else about this class, remember this. Next. Involve those who will be implementing the decision and making the decision. And in fact, I remember nothing else from that class except for that. And it's always stuck with me because it just seems like the right way to work. And I love working collaboratively. And so when I was at this work at Bank of America, luckily I was able to work with people who already had been working at the organization, could contribute to the style guide and the content standards articles that we did. And I think those decisions that are made collectively will be better owned by those who are implementing them. So next, remember those boulders? So what I want to suggest in terms of how we approach those boulders is next to have conversations that might feel at first like you're talking to an obstacle. But what I want to suggest next is that, and here's where a little bit of chutzpah comes in, that approach those boulders as if you were an in-house content standards consultant tasked with serving them. I think a lot of times content folks are sort of asked to prove our case, prove that we're worth paying attention to, prove that content is worth paying attention to, prove that we should be listened to and our recommendations heeded, that sort of thing. But I'm suggesting for strategic reasons to turn this around and put on the hat of, I am an in-house consultant seeking to serve this, let's say, marketing person. So I'm going to borrow from Stephen Covey, although he probably wasn't the first. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I'm going to ask you to break out in a moment and do a practice conversation. This is the main thing. There are a lot of pieces that could go into it. And when I ran transformational white-on-white conversations, we spent 2 hours just on having the conversation and all that comes up within us. And we don't have that kind of time now, but we do have time to start the practice of seeking first to understand somebody who might seem like an obstacle, that we're going to treat them as a potential ally and see how we can help them, see how our content solutions can help them. So if you seek first to understand, then to be understood, find out that common ground. establish your credibility and build trust, and then see how you might help them accomplish their goals with your content skills. Because if you're listening to them and if you're tuning in, if your job is to interview and collect information, because you're a consultant now, right? It'll naturally follow that you'll be able to help them. Of course, different people are tasked with different things. Like the PM has to uphold business goals. The lawyer has a lot at stake, the legal team member, because of what could happen if the company gets sued. So people are sometimes attached and tense. How can you help them with their goals? Next. So actually, can you go back? This is a little intimidating. I want to talk a little bit more. Really, what I want you to do in the breakout is, just with one other person, pretend that they are somebody who either has been an obstacle or could be an obstacle to you achieving your content goals, and you want to change that relationship into one of more cooperation. And most people, when they see that you are interested in them.
Excuse me, Jill, if I could just interject one quick thing. I just
Yeah.
want to give everybody a heads up because I'm not sure how usual this is in these meetings, but we will be going into breakout rooms in a little bit where you'll get to talk about this. And I don't know how many of you have done this on Zoom before, but we'll get to that. And I just wanted to mention
Thank
that's what
you.
we're doing.
Thank you,
Yes.
David.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're going to get to be with one other person. You don't have to if you don't want to. In fact, when we start to break up into groups of two, raise your hand if you do not want to go into a group of two, and you can stay here and chat with me or take a break or whatever you want to do. But in your groups of two, you'll get to practice. And I want you to practice just this skill of tuning into the person before you and understanding them, getting really interested in who they are and what's important to them. And I'm going to demonstrate it. I'm going to pretend that I'm talking to somebody. You can go to the next slide now, but don't feel like you have to, memorize all this. So I'd say, let's say I want to have a meet and greet because we have a new PM. Ooh, I'm going to get them while they're fresh. We'll say, where have you worked before? What was it like there? And if they haven't worked with this, what's the hardest thing about being a PM? And have you ever worked with content professionals before? What was that like? What's your ideal working relationship with a content professional? How would it go if you were directing this? And what's your worst nightmare? Okay, so you really don't like somebody doing this sort of thing. Okay, good to know. And this is not the time to argue with them because you're still getting to know them. And then see if you got it. So I think what you said was your experience with content professionals is limited, but you had this one time when somebody just took your designs, or they took something of yours and just scratched it all up, and that was really demoralizing. Is that close? Okay, well, I can understand, why you might feel a little bit of trepidation around working with content folks. So this kind of asking and reflecting can be so disarming, and it's not to manipulate, but rather to create allyship and a bond where you trust each other. Remember, trust, respect, credibility, curiosity. And so there's a lot more that can go into a conversation, but if you can get that far, the rest will probably flow. I remember one time I was going to a screenwriting pitch event, and the producers were exhausted by the end, and they were just like, oh God, here comes another screenwriter. They're going to pitch me. Oh my God. And so I think it was like a meal time, and I was sitting next to this producer and just decided I'm not going to pitch him. And just kept my pie hole shut about my screenplay. We talked about other things. I asked him about himself. And then he kind of leaned and he said, so what have you been writing? What's your screenplay about? And I was like, he asked me. It's so much more powerful when they come to you. And even if they don't worry. it's really useful. So what I would like you to do is pick a person, either actual or theoretical, and have your partner be that person and just act natural. Don't put a log in their way. Don't be an obstacle. And take turns over these next 10 minutes practicing. Yes, role play. You press for time, ask them the top 3 things that make their job harder. Yeah, practicing honestly and sincerely getting to know them. What's it like for you? What's important to you about this job? Have you worked with content folks before? What's important to you there? What's your ideal? Really getting to know them sincerely. It can't be faked. And feel into what that's like. And see if other things come, like they might naturally ask you what's important to you as a content person. See if you can find common ground. If nothing else, see if you can come away from this relationship with more of a sense of trust and maybe some common ground. Is that clear? You feel okay going into these groups in a moment? Any questions? Okay, so in a moment, David is going to put you into groups of 2. And again, if you do not want to be in a group of 2, raise your hand. You can stay here. You can take a break, whatever you want to do. I'm going to take a little break. Thanks, Tess.
So we'll be in these breakout rooms for, did we say 6 minutes? Is that right, Jill? I think
10 minutes.
or 10 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
And there'll be a countdown timer that starts 1 minute before the end. I am managing, see, it looks like we're going to have 5 breakout rooms. And with 2 people per room here. And I guess, you know what?
I think,
looks like some people are dropping. Maybe we should wait and see what, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I was gonna say, I think, we're getting, people are needing to drop now. We're a little bit after the hour. We do have a bit more time, but I wonder if maybe if there's more content for Jill to go through, that maybe we should
We were going to harvest. Yeah,
skip
we
ahead
were
to
going to.
that. Yeah.
Can you advance the slide again, David?
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, so this is kind of the heart of it. We were going to harvest the learnings from that conversation, but if you want to skip that, we can. You can put in the chat if you want to go, if you want to do the practice conversation. I don't have the sense of what the group wants. Maybe unmute everyone.
Yeah, I think, I suggest moving on, actually, Jill. We've only got a few people left at this point, so
Okay.
might be better to just kind of wrap up go
So
on
next.
with your slides.
Okay. So next. So I'll wind it up. Basically, these are some of the ideas that we discussed: bridging silos, finding your peeps who get it, and working with them to create holistic end-to-end content standards to help consistentify your organization, and keeping the gold standard of print editorial standards in mind. It's hard to do in a big organization where there's so many moving parts, and content often seems to be the last thing on people's minds. But I think it's worth holding up. And to also keep in mind and evangelize that content standards drive business results. Use the credibility, trust, and respect that you build to educate and inspire others to your vision, and also awaken the vision that intersects with yours. Find your common ground and create transformational connections that mirror the user journey. So the extent that you can create that relationship with the customer service operations person, or with the room full of people who were going in 9 different directions with the terminology, you can help break down some of these disjunctures in the user experience and create a more consistent content experience for them. Next, this is a message of hope that it might seem like you're doing teeny tiny things, but a little local content standard step contributes to a larger movement, which collectively elevates content standards on a more global level. And it can sometimes feel like you're in this alone, but we are actually in this together. And Content Strategy Seattle is a great organization that offers so much, and reach out to each other and collaborate on these things. You can create connections for elevating content standards anywhere with anyone who's doing the same thing by just sharing ideas and supporting each other. And when you get this deck next, you're going to see that you can add your success stories to this link, and you can connect with each other for support and networking on this link.
Right. Well, thanks, Jill. That was incredible, interesting, and relevant information, I think, for a lot of our audience here. I'm sorry we're kind of thinning out. It kind of happens at about this time as people are heading off for dinner or kids' bedtimes or whatever. But we do have a few more minutes if anyone has questions or wants to share anything about your own experiences, or if you have had these kinds of conversations, please feel free to share with us how it went for you, or any other questions you have for Jill.
Yeah, or if you came away, I'm curious, did anybody come away with one thing that you might do to elevate content standards within your organization?
I know that for
You
me,
just unmuted.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I'll just type in the chat.
Oh, no, go right ahead.
You can unmute.
Can we unmute everyone so we can talk?
Yeah.
And can
Well,
people come
it
on
might be
camera if they
noisy.
want to?
I think for me, it validated what I'm currently doing. I think the host has stopped video sharing, but anyway, that's fine. Yeah, what I came away with is essentially the notion of, I think, believing in the power of content to bring a level of business value, because I think throughout the years of my working, so my last job, I spent 5 years at a bank, which was incredibly painful. Like, I did a lot of content testing and a lot of alignment with the legal teams, but it was frustrating after a while. And now I work at a technology startup where I think I've just stopped working on content alignment altogether. Like, I was the one who put that we're at number one because we have like 6 different MVPs with no content guidelines whatsoever. But yes, this has kind of reminded me that these, like, the conversations between different departments is incredibly important, and I should keep doing that. So thank you.
You're so welcome.
I did have one question though, specifically on moving from the interviews to the actual content writing, because I feel like, as I'm a researcher by trade, so I do a lot of these like interviews, and I try to take note of the words that people use. But I think I always have trouble choosing, like, from the qualitative work, like which ones to graduate to like the actual content. So I don't know if you have any advice around that, like what makes it to the guideline, like, because, let's say I talk to 20 different customers, each of them might have a certain phrase for a different thing. So I don't know if you have like any advice on how to sort of read through, how customers communicate.
My experience is kind of from the opposite end of testing out different iterations of something and seeing what people understand the most. I don't know if that helps at all.
That's fair. No, that's fair. Yeah. Thank you. I think, maybe it's too ambitious to like just pull it out of like the discovery interview. So yeah.
Yeah, that would be it'd be interesting. I could imagine like having all these different like terms in front of you going, oh my gosh, what do we choose here?
Well, Any other questions or thoughts that come up for folks as we've kind of reviewed? I know it's been kind of inspiring for me because I'm right in the thick of working on developing content standards at my organization. So the finish line feels like launching the content standards documentation, but this has inspired me to really think about it in terms of like, actually, let's focus on kind of, are they being used? Are they actually affecting the user experience?
Yeah, yeah. So that's why that like the next meeting about this is going to be about governance. Like, okay, we have content standards. Now what?
Yeah, exactly.
And
Hi,
so some of the
Jill.
Hi, Megan.
Oh, sorry if you
Go
were,
ahead.
so, okay. So I work at Capital One and it's a big financial institution. So there are global standards, but we're in the process of trying to make, I'd say like subject by subject more consistent because there are all these specific terms that different teams are working on things in different capacities. I was wondering, could you share a little bit about some of the challenges that like enterprise content and content at really big organizations face when they're trying to make things more consistent?
Yes. The challenge I have found is finding your peeps. And by that I mean not those little marshmallow things that people have at Easter, but people who resonate with this idea of end-to-end content consistency. And it's hard. I mean, I met with a very high up person in marketing who was very resonant with what I was doing. She wasn't the one in a position to actually, do that in on the ground work, but she said, I'm going to introduce you to this person, and this person already is in contact with you. And so she introduced me to somebody. I wrote them again. I even just, what the heck, chutzpah, I set up a meeting with them. They never I'm like, okay, oh well, I tried. And then somebody from like a marketing copywriter really wanted to do something other than marketing copywriting, and she was really curious what we were doing in UX. I said, oh, good. So now she comes to all of our, well, when she can, she comes to our style guide meetings and content office hours, and she weighs in, and it's so super helpful. So I say, like, keep nosing around. Even if somebody in one department blows you off, keep trying till you find somebody who's receptive. And it may take, time, and some people may never talk to you. But I think that's the challenge, is finding people who are receptive, because it does take time, and you have to really kind of get it or want it to make the time to do it. I mean, when I was at T. Rowe Price, I joined a volunteer team of content strategists who were developing content standards to live alongside the design standards, not because anyone asked them to or cared, but because they thought it was important. And so we're kind of, trotting along, pulling at the hems of the design folks, say, hey, we're working on this too. Hello, come, why don't you take a look? Oh, all right. But first, let us do all this important design stuff. I'm being a little cynical, but not that much.
No, I think that's so fair. I don't know if this is worse at larger organizations, but like getting ghosted is a thing, but knowing to acknowledge that and keep trying is really important. So I appreciate that reminder, especially knowing that I'm about to have some of those conversations soon. So this presentation's been super timely. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad.
Any other questions or comments?